Hello, Internet, and welcome to another Wednesday serial. It's been a while, and I finally got to a place where I feel like I had been talking forever about, which was simply uh, not buying Glut and figuring out what I wanted. And I feel like more or less my pull's there. So let's talk about my main Marvel books. So, first off, Amazing has been living up to its name recently. The Joe Kelly run has taken a lot of elements from the past few runs that I don't particularly love, but has crafted and molded them into something that I really think is worth reading. If you haven't been reading the books, um, Peter is off in space because he got kind of nixed in a video game kind of way. Like this big enemy, Hellgate, comes out of nowhere and just beats him up, basically says you're not strong enough, and exiles him. And so Peter's on trying to find a way to get back to Earth, but also trying to find a way to become stronger to defeat this enemy at the same time. It's an interesting little thing, but it smacks of something that doesn't normally work, which is sending a lot of these Earthbound characters out into Marvel space, and normally things get nebulous and uninteresting. But what Kelly's done is taken Peter and put him in certain situations where there's some dialogue like, oh, I have the most normal life. I'm dealing with Rocket Raccoon's deaths and doing things to, in an intergalactic space coliseum to deal with this, normal everyday stuff. And it's funny because it's reminiscent of how Spider-Man talks to himself with the normal Marvel stuff as well. And you realize this is just a couple steps removed. But it's interesting to put Peter into a place where he really has to focus on being Spider-Man for a while and being a hero and reminding us of why we like him in the face of some familiar stuff. Like I said, Rocket Raccoon's there. There's a couple other spacefaring characters that are more Marvel familiar people will know about. But for the most part, it's just random zaniness, and we're dealing with that. Meanwhile, it's kind of funny because there's one issue dealing with that, and then we've been doing this where we toggle to the other issue where we have Norman Osborn as Spider-Man, which is something I still just instinctively hate. But we have him dealing with kind of what's been status quo for Spider-Man, especially coming out of the Wells run. And in this issue in particular, um, fighting Tombstone, this new character introduced, Plague RX, um, which does something that's very reminiscent that's happened to Spider-Man a number of times where he gets struck with something like blood shoots out. So basically he gets struck with some superpower and then pain and has to overcome. And what's really interesting is Tombstone thinks he's talking to Spider-Man because Norman Osborn's in the costume doing it. And something happens, and the rage and just this idea, because Tombstone knows that the Spider-Man operating is something different, because there's kind of like a violent and an intent behind it that isn't the same. So doing that, you see instinctually, like once Tombstone sees the man and sees how the man reacts, what he says in here is, "You're not him, thank God." And it's, I don't know how to put it, but that little character interaction there spoke volumes, where we haven't had that level of craft writing, character intuition, or kind of understanding of the setup. If you're going to have Norman Osborn be a hero, be Spider-Man, however you're going to do it, because this is technically like the third time Osborn's played at being Spider-Man or helping Spider or something. Um, this is actually doing something with it, and I hate this, but also Tombstone hates it, and so now you have this interesting idea, maybe reminiscent of Superior, obviously, and it's fun to read. There's something there. It's not just Spider-Man comics in light of themselves, but it's taking this new status quo and telling new stories with it, even if they're not the most original. this interaction is original. This issue I haven't seen 10 times before and wasn't something I expected, just from the cover. So I'm enjoying Amazing again. Um, in that line, many people were delighted when Straczynski was coming back to do. It's a mini, but it's interesting how they do Spider-Man minis. But when they have the Amazing logo on it and add something, usually they're elevating the mini. Say like, no, this is one of the ones worth reading. It's Straczynski back on Spider-Man, but this time it's back to the classic days where Spider-Man was in college, but he was between Gwen and MJ in some way, playing on that tension. Maybe more than was actually in the comics, but more how people remember it, I think, due to mass media and people mindlessly deliberating, if you were Spider-Man, who would you date? That's okay. It's a very small part of the comic. Most of it's Spider-Man dealing with this mystic artifact, which he was more likely to interact with in this kind of way back in those days, and trying to stop another murder from happening, doing the superhero thing. But also his connections are all tied to the college that he's enrolled on. This issue in particular plays heavily on that, particularly with a linguistics professor who, with a few little tells that he does, is starting to like hone in on like, I think you're one of my students, because why would you be trying to disguise your identity with this like fake macho voice, which had a weird anachronism in it where Peter says something like, haven't you seen a movie in the last decade, speaking to all the superhero movies that have come out? But it's like, but then when is this supposed to take place? Which plays on the whole Marvel time rubber band thing. And that's one of those moments where I think continuity, you let go. It's not worth it. But I could talk about this more when we start talking DC comics, but I do think there is a bandwidth where a lot of people, and I've had this conversation with people who I might actually watch this video, about how continuity doesn't matter. I just care about the story. But also, where you understand the character is and where they're at with other characters in relation. Serialized storytelling, the continuity matters in that way and informs a lot of things that we assume. And sometimes playing on those assumptions is fun. But without a strong continuity, a lot of this stuff becomes almost meaningless. And that takes away from the point of telling the story at all, I believe. Which leads me into Captain America #5, which has been interesting. I've read at least some of the more recent Captain America runs, especially with Steve Rogers now. And this, Zdarsky's run on Captain America, a writer who I normally don't like, in the face of him normally being very popular, sans his Batman run. This is kind of like Captain America earlier, but it's kind of jumped across the timeline with Captain America, especially because you can do that more, because it's Captain America who predates the Stan Lee rush of things, and is pitting him against Doom and Latveria. And it's interesting because the commentary is very knowingly speaking to today's mindset, but not being too specific, which I think is smart, because the news cycle in our current political state is, there's no way you could write a comic over and a couple months, let an artist get to it due to all that, and try to speak to some of the specifics. But the mindset, the disorder, the what Captain America stands and where we're against here is every day. And this is speaking to that in a way that I think is very important right now, at a time where a lot of people might be looking at a Captain America book in a way that we should. Though, honestly, I think if Marvel had any balls, we'd have a nice little frame up of Captain America punching Trump in the face. Tell me I'm wrong. And my guess actually is that Zdarsky would probably be fine with that, but I don't think that's his call. All right. Next is Daredevil versus the Punisher. This I got because I've been enjoying reading both characters. I've been working through volume 1 of Daredevil slowly over like 3 years now, and read a chunk of Punisher. And this is hardly, these characters have been kind of pinned together since the Frank Miller not team up, but a story that involved both characters during his very notable run. This is Pamela, though, who has ties to the Marvel Knights thing, and this has that noted scene with Punisher chaining Matt to the roof and then having a gun on. It's like, if you want to stop him, you're going to have to shoot me the way I'm going to shoot these people, which is the upteenth time I've seen a rendition of this, and I don't know how to put it. Pamela has a way of referencing older comics and doing certain things and having a love for a certain number of things, but he never seems to elevate or be original in what he's doing. It's always reductive and it's always less than. And I find it funny that he's such a prominent figure in the industry. I know he was a noted inker for a long time and had certain editorial ties and helped Koisado when they were doing the original Marvel Knights thing, which was a big revamp, which helped Marvel make some bones back when Marvel was in a very, very different position from where they are today. But you could skip this. It's not terrible, but you've kind of already read it, probably, if you're interested. But if you're looking for something original, Fantastic Four North continues to impress. They have Ramos since they rebooted the volume. I'm a little miffed that they rebooted the volume, but that's nothing. This issue in particular, most issues have some sort of concept, tell a good story, do stuff. This is between Black Cat and the Invisible Woman mostly, with Alicia Masters in there as well. And I don't know, this was a good solid, like, I could recommend this issue on its own. How often can you say that anymore? But I could say that about nearly every issue of the run, so go read the dang thing. It's incredible, but it's also, how do I put it? It's a cute idea that works very well in a single issue. But if you tried to base a movie on this idea, I don't think it would work because you'd have too much weight built on one single concept. But when you have that concept be only about half of about 20 pages with things coming together, it really works well. Interestingly, a break from what North's doing is Invisible Woman Part 1, where there's a lot of galactic consequence built up and put on Galactus looking for the Invisible Woman. Curious to see where that goes. But it is not all done in one issue, but oh well. One World Under Doom has ended, and unlike most Marvel events, I'm not going to say this was so incredible, but it has a satisfying ending. It works. It was an event, and we move on from it, and there are consequences moving forward. But I don't know. It's what I think a Marvel event book should be, and was written better throughout issue for issue than most. I also think I was able to enjoy it a lot more because I read this, and then I got the Fantastic Four issues kind of as a consequence of just loving the Fantastic Four right now. And I did get the Gods tie-in just because I was curious about where they were going with that, and I'm not sure that issue was worth it, but I didn't do all the tie-ins or anything. I read the main book and I was golden. So, huzzah. I do think you might have needed a couple of the Fantastic Four issues to make full sense of a couple of things, though, so maybe I lucked out in that respect. I don't know. Godzilla destroys the Marvel Universe. This is all wrapped up in a quick little concept that feels kind of weak, and I can't describe that without spoiling it, but I'm going to spoil it. but it doesn't feel like much of a spoiler. So they get rid of Godzilla by exiling him to a planet that's a dead planet in a dead solar system using a combination of Marvel powers. Okay. The problem is they already had like regulated him to like an alternate universe, negative zone, some Marvel incursor of far away. And he was able to rip through the multiverse slash side universe, whatever they landed on, to get back to this Earth to start destroying it again. So I'm just saying, it feels like they already did it and it didn't work, but because they used a different combination of magic words this time it did. Completely unsatisfying based on the way it was already written. And this is the sort of thing that I kind of come to expect from Gary Dugan, because I don't think he understands, honestly, concepts. It's a little painful. So, lesson learned there. And there is an epilogue on the back of this where Null gets a hand on Godzilla, and there's a warning from 2099, and they're going to do another little mini that will be much the same, but now with symbiote Godzilla, which, okay. Next up, there's a Red Band Punisher Percy mini going. It always has a couple scenes that are just ultra violent, which is fine. But the conceit is that the Kingpin has kind of a mind control device on the Punisher and is having him more or less do his bidding. Frank's fighting back. There's some memory issues tied in there. As far as a Punisher story, it's fine, but not great. I always find when they have the Kingpin in the Punisher, it never quite works because they can't. Kingpin's Marvel property. They can't really do anything with him. But it always feels like that should be it by the end. So we'll see. Next is The World to Come Punisher, which is another Pamela story, which, not having that one famous scene, but otherwise everything I said about the Daredevil Punisher kind of feels the same here. This feels very recursive of Franken Punisher and that whole thing. Yeah. And then finally, there is The World to Come Quesada Priest. And yeah, I'll be honest, I'm having a heck of a time following the story. I'm waiting for the mini to kind of finish, and then I'm hoping to reread and maybe make sense of it. But so much of this book is actually placed in back matter with kind of like documents written kind of in a Hickman-esque sort of thing, where different characters have like a journal or a blog that they posted or something. And a lot of it's there. And because a lot of this is alternate universe retelling, including some deep lore cuts from the Priest Black Panther run that I haven't read since I was a freshman in college. I'm struggling to make heads or tails of it. It is not new reader friendly. I don't think it's old reader friendly. I don't think it's reader friendly. That doesn't mean it's bad, but it's needlessly dense for what it is, and some of the concepts are a big deal, and it definitely pissed a lot of people off because it's replacing the Black Panther with a white guy, which is what it is. I don't know. I'm not necessarily offended by the book, but I don't think the juice was worth the squeeze on this one. Maybe it'll make more sense in trade. I'd actually be curious to see how they present some of this in trade, because they might reorder the presentation of some of the things, which actually might help immensely. And also maybe reprint some stuff from the Priest book, which might actually help give context to the book itself for some things that seem very detailed, especially for things like Shuri in Priest's run is not the Shuri that we know now very much, which is something I keep butting up against now that I've been reading Marvel for so long is that these characters are not characters, they're concepts, and who they are change dramatically over the course of a few decades. And so, yeah. So I don't know. By and large, I'm really enjoying it. I'm looking forward to most of the rest of my pile, and I'll make a couple more videos, talk through that, and thank you for watching.